Elena Whisler is currently responsible for overseeing the customer relationship, sales, and marketing teams to manage and expand the clearinghouse's client base across its core payment products. Her current priorities include growing the RTP network across the U.S. financial system participants and evolving the customer engagement model for all TCH products. She's also currently serving on the Women in Payments Advisory Board. She chairs ND Schmidt, has over 30 years of financial services experience as a banker, consultant, and analyst at Bank of America, EY, and Gartner. And he has guided banks, vendors, and startups in making key business and technology decisions. He chairs the CGI's Banking Industry Growth Council, sits on CGI's Banking Industry Strategic Cabinet, and the U.S. Banking Steering Committee, and previously served on the Federal Reserve's Faster Payments Task Force. Unfortunately, Sarah Billings had some technical difficulties, and she will not be able to join us today. We know that we'll miss the input that she would be able to provide on this topic. Whether you call it faster cross-border payments or cross-border faster payments, cross-border payments today rely on a series of complex network or bilateral relationships between financial institutions. And it's complicated, it's expensive, and there must be a better way. Faster, less costly, and more transparent cross-border payments are possible across all payment types, personal, business, and government. But there are many aspects to consider when aiming to increase speed, ubiquity, and transparency while simultaneously reducing risk and cost. So this session, we're going to focus on the areas to address for successful implementation of faster cross-border payments, how to reduce risk, and increase transparency and interoperability, and how technology can promote and support that initiative. So as a warm-up exercise, we have like 4 questions. The first one is, where are you on your strategy for adopting real-time payments? Have not thought about it, are analyzing it, ready to rock and roll, have adopted with other countries real-time payments infrastructure already. So if you guys can use the join the conversation to mark A, B, C, or D, whichever your option is, we'd appreciate it. Let's give you 10 seconds for this. Don't be shy.
Well, in Orlando, we can always make assumptions too about what the audience is up to and kind of give our perspectives.
That is true. So I think that B and C are the 2 most common ones. Right now we have 2 Bs and one that is a B and C. Let's move on to the next question. Are you considering cross-border faster payments in your strategies? Yes or no? A or B? Overwhelming A response. So if people are looking at cross-border payments, fantastic. And we got one that's great. We need the tools to offer it. Very good. What do you think is the biggest concern for cross-border faster payments? Legal frameworks, data protection, currency exchange and settlement, other. That's interesting. We're getting a lot of currency exchange and settlement with a little bit of the legal frameworks. Very good. Thank you. And finally, what approach do you think financial institutions should take towards cross-border faster payments? Hub and spoke approach, where spoke being the internal bank processing and settle locally, a market infrastructure undertake foreign exchange and settlement in the originating country, or market infrastructures undertaken the foreign exchange and settlement in the receiver country. So we're getting C and a client pricing models versus transaction pricing models. Okay, very good. Excellent. Very good. So overwhelming C and a few of you think A, right? Fantastic. So now that we're done with that component, we will, sorry, what happened there? Go back to the presentation. So, Elena, who is actually driving the demand for faster cross-border payments? The corporates, the consumers, or someone else?
Yeah, no, great question. I think Andy and I can play off of a little bit of this. So I always start with a balance of the supply and the demand side, right? And we see a need for faster data, faster visibility of payments, faster tracking, faster confirmation from a consumer and corporate perspective. So they drive usually the demand of things. But also, I think what I see in our role at the clearinghouse is the push and the demand from global organizational bodies, such as BIS as an example, that are driving some of the thinking and oversight. Like, we all need to do better in the cross-border space to move money faster. We all need to do better. And so what's exciting about that is you see it on the consumer and corporate side. And I think all of you in the audience would agree that, we all need it in our day-to-day lives when we think about cross-border payments. Could be payroll, could be B2B disbursements. But as part of CPMI and BIS, there is a specific program for cross-border payments. And so they're specifically focused on, at a global scale, faster, cheaper, more transparent, and more inclusive cross-border payments, continuing to ensure safety and security, to have the benefits for all of us living our day-to-day lives in the economies as a whole, because we know cross-border payments are systematically important for our economic growth, international trade, global development, financial inclusion. And so part of the G20 roadmap is to enhance that, and it kind of allows all of us, I would say, as market infrastructures, to put special care and feeding into the evolution of faster cross-border or cross-border faster payments. Either way, I love that debate.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at some of the chat, and Trisha's comment. I've been thinking about it for 30 years, still can't figure out why it's taken so long. I mean, that's one of the. I love that comment. And it has been, and well, part of it is that we haven't quite been ready for it. And what I mean by that is that existing systems, worked well enough, and they were fast enough, but as the speed of business has gotten faster, as the speed of and as the reach of business has become more global, being able to share that information, being able to execute those transactions in moments as opposed to hours, as opposed to days, makes a huge difference. And so, especially when we're talking about, and one of my favorites is the trade world, and you've got a tanker or a freighter that is in port, and you want to be able to release the funds right away. And we just haven't had that mix of business need and system capability. We've been able to do real time, or many geographies have been able to do real time domestically, and have been able to do cross border. But the real time cross border piece of it has been lacking. Part of it, as Elena alluded to, just some of the challenges of cross border payments in general. But as we're standardizing, that was one of the other issues. If we're all speaking a different payment language, trying to translate that in real time can be a real challenge. But being able to speak a common language at speed on a global basis is something that we're still trying to figure out how to do. But creates tremendous opportunities, whether it's remittances, whether it's trade. And so as the business cases develop, and laying these business cases and these opportunities on top of secure infrastructure, scalable infrastructure, it's really the next step. And I'm really actually quite excited to see where we can take this, because for me one of the other pieces of it that I think is going to be important is the seamlessness of it. Can I, for example, initiate as a corporate a payment in my ERP system, have it flow to the other end of the world, and update yours automatically, and have the shipment be released, or what have you. And so we're still moving towards that still moving towards that market. But with each incremental improvement, we're unlocking new value and certainly creating new opportunity.
Great, fantastic. So on that topic, right, on that note, Elena, what do you think is the greatest opportunity for cross-border payments?
So I'm going to go, and maybe this touches to one of the answers related to kind of currency and settlement. For me, and what we see in our conversations and in the payment space is that end-to-end visibility. So for me and where our conversation goes, how do we make the end-to-end process and visibility of those payments better? And better is a very loaded term, as we all know, but that's kind of where I focus is looking at all of the components to see that visibility and transparency of the payments. And that's my interpretation of how some people might have answered that with currency and settlement is at the end of the day, they want to know how much is sent over, when it's going to be sent over, and really the confirmation back that it's going to be sent over and received and posted and accessible for the individual or businesses to have access to. So that's where I see it. I think what I love about kind of integrating domestic real-time payment networks together is in those networks, the domestic real-time payment networks, there is in most cases, if not all, some level of message related to confirmation of payment. And it is no longer like no news is good news, but good news is good news, and bad news is actually good news because it's timely and it's right there when the customers are transacting. And so that's partly kind of what I love about layering in the values of these real-time payment schemes and instant payment schemes around the world is you have that additional confirmation message that helps with that end-to-end transparency, which I think we're all looking for.
Which is similar to what FedEx and Amazon do on the supply chain side of the equation. Now we need to do it on the payment side of the equation.
That's right. That's right.
Fantastic. Andy, any comments that you'd like to add to?
Yeah, just building on that, the transparency piece of it is key. And to Elena's point, even bad news is good news because you can actually do something about it. You remember in the old days, if you didn't hear anything, it's like, what's the next action? Is there something to fix? Is everything okay? But now you have that kind of instant confirmation. For me, the other piece of it, not just the transparency, but the removing of the friction behind the payment. So being able to have that information payload so that for example, what transact or what opportunity this is tied to, what invoice this is tied to, what bill of lading this is tied to, and so you have that again that completeness, for lack of a better term, of experience where what the payment's for and the systems can be updated immediately, as opposed to trying to track what the opportunity is, where it's tied to, and so on. And I just remember, eons ago, when I first started my career in banking, one of our clients had $12 million wires stuck in suspense because we knew who the wire was supposed to go to, but we didn't know where because there was no information. And so being able to remove those friction points, being able to expedite the connection of the payment to the opportunity or to the bill makes it much easier, much more efficient in terms of how we can move trade, how we can move funds. It also gives you much better understanding of what your own liquidity needs are. If you're the bank or the corporate or what have you. So being able to have that level of information be passed makes it easier for all involved.
Fantastic. And I know we've been talking about removing friction and transparency of payment. So, and there is a certain higher customer expectation for transparency, right? So we're all used to FedEx, we're all used to Amazon, and with the pandemic, I think we used those. And Netflix, right? So we could watch our programs and binge watch them. So this need for immediate gratification and being told where things are through all the step of the delivery process sort of creates this expectation that I can do the same with payments. And I know that even though Sarah's not here, I know that when we talked about how can you make faster payments more transparent, one of the things that Sarah had talked to us during our uh, internal prep sessions was that she sees it as being two buckets, right? One is make what is currently available better, right? So Swift Go, GPI, etc. So improve what is already there in the market. And I think the other was to start with a blank or new slate and build a solution that's appropriate for this modern world, right? So, can you sort of complement that a little bit more, Elena?
Yeah, I think we're going into now. So now what? Now that we know and we have our goals and like the CPMI in my world, right? We have the roadmap that it's been laid out and globally approved, and we have entities, we have market infrastructures beginning to really dive in and solve these problems. How do we solve them? And what do we have available? Kind of what are the methodologies of solving them? And so when we were talking, that's exactly laid out. It's like there are many existing networks and components and entities today in the space. There are ways to improve upon them and kind of create the roadmaps related to those. And I think, Swift did a great job with implementing GPI and kind of continuing to evolve with Swift Go, et cetera. And then starting with a blank slate, because there's new technology out there. There's distributed letters that are being taken advantage of. There's new nodes on new networks. So creating kind of additional closed loop networks that are, very common in our space of cross-border payments, as well as kind of what I mentioned in terms of taking advantage of domestic modernization platforms and bringing those together. So kind of having both the evolve what we have as well as the blank slate helps both sides, I think, in terms of moving forward. So we can all move forward in the space we have today and really, focus on kind of the overarching North Star, as I call it, or goals of modernizing cross-border payments. I think for at the clearinghouse, we are very much focused on leveraging the networks that we have here in the United States with the RTP network for real-time payments and the CHIPS network for wires to then build those linkages with other real-time and high-value networks in countries to, at the end of the day, bring critical mass on both sides, transparency, taking advantage of those confirmations that I mentioned to do cross-border payments. And then underlying have the settlement in place that the country's payment systems have already kind of managed. So that to us is what's really exciting. And it might be a mesh between the two buckets. Orlando, we might need to debate that a little bit, but that's kind of where I see, the clearinghouse moving towards. We just kicked off a proof of concept or a pilot that, program that we call IXB for short, because we all love acronyms in this space. But it's for international cross-border payments. And our initial focus is between the RTP network in the US and RT1 in Europe with EBA clearing and working with Swift as well. So kind of having three parties involved to help and the financial institutions in the pilot to help evolve how we're going to create this next level of cross-border real-time payments. So it is really exciting to see, and I'm happy to talk about it in a few minutes. But I'll let Andy add into that.
Yeah, well, and the sharing of the information, the kind of the dude, where's my payment model, so that you can see where those funds are. We've been. The good news, the bad news, because of the pandemic, technologies like this have made it easier for us all to connect. And it's been easier to get your banking information, place payments remotely, and so on. The flip side of that is that our patience levels have gone to absolute zero in terms of wanting to have the information right away. So being able to have a sense through GPI and others, like where that payment is part and parcel of trying to manage and serve that expectation. The other piece of it is, as we're looking at cross-border, as we're looking at where we're headed, another element that's important, just especially from the blank slate standpoint, is digital currencies are becoming more and more important. And so, whether it's CBDC, whether it's Bitcoin, whether even you're transacting in NFTs, those types of things are going to become part of the fabric of payments. And so, by having these infrastructures in place where we can have this visibility, where we can speak a common language, makes it a lot easier to add new payment types, new payment capabilities. Not necessarily new payment rails, but at least new revenue, or sorry, new funding sources, so that we can have that level of flexibility. We're seeing increasingly banks working with their clients to help them facilitate cryptocurrency purchases and so on. News came across the wire just yesterday that here in Boston, Fidelity is enabling a 401k that's based on Bitcoin. So this is something that is coming, and by being able to lay the groundwork for transparency, for interoperability, for being able to use the information on a cross-border basis, we're able to actually accelerate new types of transactions at a pace that we've never had before.
Fantastic. Talking of transparency, there is a question on the chat. It says that transparency implies that the time value of money is equal to the time value of information. Finally, yep. How do we get to the common language, as ISO is flexible in the extreme? So, and I know that we've had this discussion multiple times before, Elena and Andy.
Yeah.
I'll turn it to you, Elena.
Yeah, I'll start, but I'm a bit, my background is more on the technology side, and I know usually the technology is not the problem. So formatting and translating messages are not the problem. And I don't mean to make light on that. What the business logic and the business requirements and legal requirements around what data needs to be across is really the fun stuff, I'll say, in the heart of the matter. And ISO too, I mean, to Trisha's point, 100%, it is extendable. It is as long and winded as you want, or as short and sweet as you want. And honestly, each country kind of has taken their version of ISO, which is fine, but then it's still the conversation of, do we have enough information to meet our own domestic regulatory and legal requirements, as well as business logic, like what the payment is for, and what are the parties involved to do that. So I love that, I think we have come to the time where the value of money and the value of information are at the same time, which is awesome. And that now we have the tools technology-wise to pass the data we need to pass. And now it is kind of that continued conversation of, with our regulatory environment always changing and learning and adapting to what our businesses and consumers need, what information needs to be carried along with that. So I think we're definitely getting there. I'm probably more hopeful or glass half full than others. And that's mainly because I see the data in the payloads. I see that it's available, and I know that there's tools out there to do any translation that we need to do.
Yeah, and it's interesting. ISO 20022 gives us a common payment language, but everybody has their own dialect, and so there is a bit of a translation issue. For me, we could certainly use tools to fix that. I think also part of it's just practice and being able to make sure that we're sharing the information in a place where the receiving party expects to see it. And that you can have, maybe not industry standards or infrastructure standards, but at least standards within country about how you're going to share that information, so that so that when I talk about an XYZ, what I'm talking about. But I mean, here in the States, even within 10 miles of where I live, a sandwich that you can buy at Subway can be anything from a sub to a grinder to even a hoagie. And so having that layer of understanding is something that'll come with time. But all three parties know that I'm talking about a sandwich with certain things in it that I've ordered a certain way. So again, it is going to be practice. It is a new muscle that we're going to have to build. But yes, exactly. Or a hero if you're from New York. And don't get me started on the difference between a shake, a cabinet, and a frap. But it's all the same types of things that we know what we're talking about. We just need to be able to translate it better so we can facilitate those transactions.
Fantastic. Kelly actually has a question on the chat that ties into exactly our next topic which is what within our organizations, right, we're doing to enable and promote cross-border faster payment. So her question was that it seems that we're still focused on a wire or ACH transaction. Is there any dialogue with Interact to allow cross-border payments, USD to USD or CAD to CAD via business e-transfers? Right, so it's a different take a little bit, but a little bit more specific. But if we can talk about what the clearinghouse and what CGI are doing in terms of enabling cross-border faster payment, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, do you want me to go first?
Please.
Okay. Maybe there's audience members from Interact that can answer tactically that question. I know the clearinghouse certainly has aspirations and to work next with Canada for linking RTR or whatever mechanism that we can do between US dollar and Canadian dollar cross-border. So maybe I'll take a moment and talk a little bit more about the IXB pilot and program that we are working on that I mentioned. So at the clearinghouse, we do have ACH processing, wire processing with chips, check image, and the RTP network today. And kind of through the work with the RTP network, because it's the most recent one that we launched, there's always been an underpinning of cross-border. Now, I'll mention that on our wire network for chips, we inherently do cross-border transactions today. They are US dollar based. And so the next evolution of that is kind of going to touch into this IXB program that I'll mention. So our initiative really does come from and is driven by both competition, customers asking us, and the regulatory expectations for a faster, more transparent ways of doing cross-border real-time payments. I mentioned that our partners right now in the pilot are EBA Clearing and SWIFT. So we are transacting between the RTP network and RT1. And what we are looking to do is make available any financial institution that is connected to either network will be able to transact a cross-border real-time payment with the rules related to each of those networks and entities. So we are first focusing on retail, mid-market, lower value transactions, and then we'll incorporate chips as a high value in the future, and then continue to enhance. The one thing I'll say when we look at the proof of concept as well as next steps, as a market infrastructure for us, compliance and regulatory oversight is at its core. So whatever we look at is how to make sure that this is end-to-end transparent, but with safety, security in mind. We look at flexible and scalable architecture and technologies and kind of evaluating different solutions to help us along the way. But it is very important for us to keep in mind all of the obligations for participants, whether large or small, on the RTP network that can accommodate such work. So that's a little bit about IXB. We did a press release last year, and we're looking to go further live with additional content in the third quarter.
Thank you. Andy?
And then on the CGI side, I mean, the integration piece of it is where spend a lot of our time, but also in helping the banks set their strategies and working with the various networks to figure out, what the next step is, how we can deliver these types of things. So, we work closely with Interac on the U.S. side. We work closely with the Fed and with TCH. And so, as we're getting to a true, faster cross-border world, we're helping advance the technology to make sure that the connections act as we want them to. But we're also helping to set the strategy and to work with the institutions to figure out, how do you want to use this? Can your infrastructure support it? Are there other markets that you want to have these types of transactions with, so that we can leverage what we've learned and then use it to expand? Because, again, my nirvana is to be able to send a payment to anyone, anywhere in the world instantly, and have what I sent it for, and be able to acknowledge its receipt. So by connecting bit by bit, by helping lay those strategies out, by working on those partnerships, by working on those connectors, those are the things that CGI is doing to help enable this cross-border faster world.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, and I think the other piece that we are doing as well is we have members, CGI members, that are participating and attending all the regulators' meetings and calls to action, right? So we have folks that talk to the clearinghouse, talk to the Fed here in the United States, of course. We also have teams that are in contact with Payments Canada, Interac, etc. So we have a vested interest in making sure that these initiatives actually take root and grow. Speaking of growing, how long do you think it's going to take for cross-border faster payments to reach critical mass, and why? So I'll start with you, Andy. Elena has always started, so I'll throw that over to you first.
Thank you. No, I think so there are two key parts that I think are important. It's not as hard as it used to be. So we've gotten the networks down. We're moving towards faster payments. And we know what format we want to be leveraging. So it really is up to us to decide how quickly we want to move. Now, in the prep for this, for this session, one of the points that I raised was that when I first started following payments, or mobile payments specifically, we were 3 to 5 years away from ubiquitous mobile payments, and that was in 2007. And we're still 3 to 5 years away from ubiquitous mobile payments. But in terms of the cross-border world, it is that, depending on where you are in the world, it is that mix of regulatory and business need, business opportunity that's pushing it forward. So it's working through the use cases. It's making sure that we've got the connections and the regulatory frameworks in place that we can support the currency exchange and so on. But it really is, it may sound trite, but it really is up to us to set that schedule and to execute against it. Because we have all the major tools in place. It's just a matter of building the connections and the capabilities on the other side.
Yeah, and just to add, so one would say we all love choice, and so we're always going to have multiple choices, just like the questions at the beginning of the session. And so there will be different levels of kind of the critical mass depending on which options out there, which kind of product or services your institution uses or makes available, right? Because we're all servicing different entities to solve the same problem, and so choice is a great thing. And I guess, and it's always a continuous process. So we're never done here in payments. I know all of you would agree with that, where there is no finish line, whether I want it or not. But it's evolving of what that finish line is. And we were joking too, now there's the metaverse. So we're going to be transacting cross-border payments in the metaverse. And I don't even know what that means, except for I have my little virtual headset and I get to do some things. But it's always evolving and changing. And that's a fabulous thing that we have to take advantage of. And I think for us at the clearinghouse, we just look at what our role is, what our focus is, and how do we move the needle forward in that regard. And that hopefully applies to everyone as well in their own space.
And going
Fantastic.
on with that, um, we're not looking for all payments to be faster payments. They don't need to all be faster payments. It is that choice, the opportunity to move payments at the pace that you need them to move.
No, fantastic. Thank you very much. I know we have only 5 more minutes, so wrapping up, what advice, what recommendation, what suggestions would you give to banks that are considering cross-border approach for faster payments? I'll start with you, Elena.
Great. Well, I touched upon it, and I really, and I'd love to be, debated with this, but I do think you have to look at your customer base and kind of the purpose of your organization and lead with that in mind. We cannot all solve all problems in the cross-border space alone. And so what we always look at is who do we partner with? What do we do ourselves? And how can we move the needle with other organizations that we don't have access to partner to make cross-border real-time payments exactly what is laid out, right? In terms of getting to faster, cheaper, more inclusive, more transparent payments. Because at the end of the day, we all want that. And so if you lead with the customer in mind, then one, your organization is more successful tactically, but then you're kind of bringing the environment with you along the way. So that's how I like to think about it.
No, and going along with that, I mean, the other thing that I think we need to remember is that we've all made technology investments. So so it's really about making in many cases what you've got better, not necessarily replacing it. So being able to layer on top of that, being able to extend those investments is going to be a key part of the discussion as well. And and to Elena's point about start with the customer, also have a sense of where do you want to play, where do you want to focus in your own payments business, and are there customers who that you're looking to pursue, are there customers that you're looking to better serve, and so on, so that you can have that type of conversation on where you want to go.
Absolutely fantastic. We have another question about how much do you think the FSB initiative will push real-time cross-border forward?
Yeah, well, I'll start. I can answer. And maybe because I have high hopes. So I really do. And Trish, we could probably chat later. But I do think it helps because I think we're all marching to the same goals and objectives. I know there's different global organizations that are creating their own solutions based upon that, and I think that's all wonderful because at the end of the day, all of those are competing forces that drive us together to the same goal outlined by the Financial, Stability Board, right? So I like it in and of itself because it lays out a common foundation that we're all shooting for. Whether or not it hits the mark this year versus next year or the next 5 years, I think that's a bit of what we need to get pushed on as organizations is this needs to be what you wake up to every day. And not something that we look at, okay, let's check back on the roadmap next summer, right? Like we need to move forward at a faster pace like we talked about earlier. And I think that'll be the biggest thing I'd love to see FSB and other organizations push us on tactically.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I want to thank both Elena and Andy for your insights. And I really would love to thank the attendees for all the great questions and your participation. Yes, Trish, we agree that it gives a global goal, right?
Yeah.
And so I really think that to that point that Andy and Elena made, if you're thinking about cross-border faster payment, there are countless institutions out there that are working together to support you, to give you support. There is a certain amount of investment that you're going to have to make, but you have different groups that are out there trying to make this a reality and reach critical mass. Thank you very much, and I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation as much as I did.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
guys. Have a good one.
Bye. Cheers.